Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Rich, and this is Branden, and you are listening or watching our Two Guys Tech Chats podcast. This episode is going to be kind of a what I call data center mixed bag. So I was thinking about in the past, we've talked about VMware, we've talked about other miscellaneous topics, but you and I have got a lot of experience in the data center and as Homelabbers, and so the idea of like going through and talking about different gear that's in the world, what you think of those companies and the gear that they make. So we'll do servers, we'll do networks and firewalls and just miscellaneous data center.
Yeah, and keep in mind we can only do a tip of the iceberg. There's no way we're gonna hit every vendor, every new vendor that's out there, every new solution. They're just not possible.
Sure. And go through whether what your thoughts are, if you have thoughts, because I think we probably both very opinionated people, but also kind of like talk about whether it would be good for a home lab or the business or both, right? Because I think that's important. There's key differentiators, right?
Yeah.
And I expect the audience to get down and tell us all of the things that they disagree with. Because actually, I really, as a side note, Branden, really enjoy when people are like, well, actually, I disagree with you because of this.
It boosts engagement.
Well, not even that. I mean, look, I've been doing this for nearly 2 decades of like straight on like engineering work in the DC. You are much younger than me.
Yeah.
But have put in a ton of time too.
Yeah.
And I think that, our experiences are what drive us in the decisions we make when it comes to like what we recommend to management to buy for gear, for companies, and what we put into our home labs and that kind of stuff. So I think that there's a lot of value to that. So with that, let's,
How long have you been in the game for data center stuff? Because I remember last time we talked, you were working with Ethernet frame buffers.
This is the problem with working with a younger person who's like their whole life has been like the internet. You've always had the internet.
I had a modem. I heard the hiss dial tone occasionally, but that was like the end of it. Right. So like in terms of enterprise gear at that time, no idea.
Right.
Never.
It was different. Those were all mainframes and DEC alphas and stuff like that, and that we didn't have what we have now. But yeah, so I've been doing it a long time.
Yeah.
Which is good. And you've been, how many years have you been doing this now?
Jeez, I'd say 3 officially. I mean, I was like
you
pseudo
were like
pseudo help desk,
right.
Could run things, but I'd say 3 official years of doing full on, VMware updates and stuff like that.
Yeah, and being in there making decisions on what gear and also like, I mean, your home lab game is good, right? You're doing a lot of this stuff at home too, so your expertise and opinions transcend just like the years you put in a business. So.
Yeah, and I feel like especially on the home lab, a lot of it is cost driven.
Oh yeah,
like if you give me free licenses and you give me free hardware, I'll run whatever you want in my home lab.
So,
you want to talk compute?
I want to talk servers. Yeah, let's talk compute first. And so, I'm going to ask you questions. We'll start. We can go back and forth on this, but I just wrote down. Basically 4. There's plenty more server manufacturers out there, people. So don't get mad if you're like, well, you didn't say anything about Gigabyte. Well, Gigabyte's not so prevalent in the United States when it comes to servers. So they are, but not as much.
And I think before we go into details on like vendors and talk about specific ones, let's talk about like your type of servers. You have your rack servers, your one use. These are like your compute nodes. These are something that are we like to call them high compute clusters.
Sure, put a bunch of them together.
Where you've got an entire rack and it's stacked up with one U things, and they're just churning out whatever data you're giving them,
making tons of noise.
And then we've got your 2Us. These are normally your more virtualization servers. They may have disk populated in the front, they may not. And then you get into your 3 and your 4Us, and these are like quad socketed processors and stuff like that. Like when you do big data, big transactional databases and stuff like that, that's what usually sits on them.
SQL's in there. Things where you get the benefit of having, like in those special cases, that's all about like having gobs of memory and gobs of compute just to do a specific task.
Yeah.
So that makes sense.
And then on the other hand, you have things like chassis that are blades of just dense compute and that run to a backframe. And so I'm more familiar now with chassis than I ever thought I would be due to my job. But it's kind of I see their use, and I see a lot of their use for the kind of the in the middle where you have a 2U server, but it's got 4 nodes in it. Yeah. We've been looking at those. We have the 2 node downstairs that you all like to use, and that's kind of like the home lab happy medium. If you can kind of
there's
you get
a fat twin I've been looking at.
I
will totally go off.
We'll get there. We'll get there in a minute. Okay. But like, it's those type of things that you have such a breadth of different things you can do.
Sure.
And then there's places now that like They do microservers, which is like a 3U. It's a 3U box, but it's got 12 separate nodes in it that are each have their own dual processors, dual RAM, 2 Ethernet ports, all connected up. So the compute landscape from where I started at just, we put a server in racks and that's how it works, is very different now, especially once you jump into chassis and the data center, which is trying to push the most compute into the smallest square footage it can.
Yeah. Density saves money.
Yeah.
Typically. It doesn't save on power. That's a lie. Like the whole idea, like if we just make it smaller, it'll consume less power. That's not true.
Well, that's what's freaking me out with all these new like Genoa and the Sapphire Rapids stuff. We're getting CPUs that are pulling 300, 400 watts, which is making me think my 120 volt circuit is looking a little long in the tooth.
So let's go and let's talk about. I think it's important, and this is probably going to irk some people, but tell us what you think. I honestly want to know, but I want to know what your opinions are. First off, do you have for the data center, for business, whether it's enterprise, medium business, whatever, but business versus Homelab? We're going to break them into 2 separate buckets here. What is your favorite server manufacturer?
Yeah.
Based on, and then you can tell me your reasons why. I want to know why for business versus Homelab.
So for business right now, for me, it's hands down Dell.
Why?
Well, the biggest thing is I run an open managed enterprise. It allows me to set all my BIOSes to be the same, set all the iDRACs to be the same, make sure things are up and down, updated on all their firmware, all from one interface. And it's super nice that I just wire things up. It checks for new firmware, and then when I'm rolling my updates, it'll just roll out the new firmware, and it makes life so much easier. Also, Dell for the business because no one has nice of an iDRAC as iDRAC 9.
Yeah, Brand's talking about basically a lot of different terms. Lights out, IPMI, iDRAC. These basically
integrated Dell remote access controller or something. It has an acronym.
I mean, of course it does, but basically it is the thing that allows you to interact with the server through out-of-band means. So let's say your server is hung up, you can't get to whatever it is, like your OS is crashed, whatever that OS might be, and you can use the out-of-band interface, the iDRAC if it's Dell, or ILO if it's HPE, or I'm sure Cisco's got a name for theirs.
It's supposed to be IPMI is the thing, or the BMC is the actual controller. Yeah, it's integrated Dell remote access controller. That's
and Brandon is right. Prove me wrong, but I agree that the enterprise DRAC specifically in the later generations, actually starting after like generation 5, was 4 was getting better. 3 was rough.
7 is the best because they switched to HTML5 instead of Java plugins, which I was like,
that's a generation
bless.
thing, right?
You had to run a firmware update, and it added the HTML5 web interface, and it was so worth it. Yeah. But Dell has really stupid licensing.
Yeah, it's not. You spend like thousands of dollars on these boxes, and then you have to buy a license.
And there's a different licensing between standard, pro, and if you want to hook it up to OME. And so that's just kind of annoying.
By the way, as a side note, you can't use OME on precision rack-mounted servers. It can only be enterprise servers.
It has to be the
out the hard way.
The R servers or the MX chassis.
Yeah, not happy about that. I get it. You got to differentiate your product. So, you're saying that
my recommendation would be for Dell. Right. Dell's going to make it easy out of the box. If you are a small business and you only need 3 servers, just hooking them up with iDRACs that you can access. If you're really crazy, you can hook them up on their own VLAN to the firewall, so you can make sure you have a direct, remote
truly
access
out-of-band VLAN, right? Which is what you should have, guys. Seriously, shout out out-of-band management VLAN if you can swing it. Right?
So but that's my thought. What about you?
I broken record here. So I agree, but I have similar but also different reasons.
Okay.
Experience has taught me that dealing with Dell from an enterprise level or business level has meant that you have better pricing. There's
the whole business side of the support agreement you need. Yeah.
Your support from Dell, in my personal experience, has been top notch. Whereas, dealing with HPE, sorry guys, HPE gear might be great for a Homelab, but
it's not even. HPE locks all their Gen 10 or newer stuff behind a paywall.
I didn't know that because I'm not buying HPE.
Yeah, I'm not buying. But I was watching Craft Computing, and he grabbed one, and he was like, "This is great. It's a great server." And I was like, "Cool. I know. As you know, the TSMC factory slaps on that new lovely label, and we're cranking out HPE servers, and then 2 hours later, we crank out Dell servers and all that."
Right.
But he says you're locking firmware updates behind this, and this is like right as like Spectre and Heartbleed and all those speculative execution vulnerabilities were out, and HPE just kind of went hands off and was like, pay us and we'll give you security updates. And that's kind of the thing. I'm like, you can't be putting security updates behind paywalls. I get it. They can. They legally can, but like as someone who has used Supermicro and Cisco's, that Cisco does the same thing. If you want the latest firmware, you pay for the support contract.
Yeah, I would never recommend Cisco gear to anyone. But I have such a for one specific reason, and that is that they don't give you a direct USB port or a direct like monitor connection physically when you have to use their special dongles.
Yes.
For the use. And
yes,
I mean the last
I run some UCS chassis. They're a lot.
this is so silly, but this is all based on like personal experience. When you are in a data center, as a person like Branden and I, you're only there because something's really wrong, or you're installing something new. But you're typically only in there because something's not working. You have to put hands-on product, right?
Yeah.
And to know that you have to run around panicking to find the dongle that some other dude took off the chassis, put in a drawer somewhere and didn't tell anybody, and you need that dongle right now because you need to get on there, you need to see what's going on, and you can't. And like that's just like what you saved how much money by just like dropping those ports. Come on.
The nice thing to get around that is Cisco, when you get Cisco chassis, you have to wire them up to what they call a fabric interconnect. The fabric interconnect is an HA pair of fiber channel or Ethernet over fiber channel, whatever you want, switches that does all your management. And that's where your management plane sits. It sits on the fiber channel. So you can hook into the IP and hook into the web interface, and it is very nice once you're there.
Sure.
But yes, it is the manual part of doing lots of stuff with Cisco is just blows my mind. And it sucks because their rack servers are the same way. You have the same stupid dongle, but you can hook those up to the fabric interconnect as well, and it'll make life easier. But it's kind of like Apple. You got to invest in the Cisco ecosystem to live in the data center life, because you can do some really cool stuff with it, but you have to be fully invested.
That's why and we'll this is a great segue into what we personally like and use, both of us. I know where we're going with this for our home labs, and that is Supermicro, because there's no BS with that.
No, right? Supermicro gives you a box.
It's just gear. It's just gear, and it's bog standard gear, and you don't have to deal with any of that stuff, and you get your updates. The BMC or whatever is $25. It's simple. Yeah, it's super cheap. It's super cheap. Whereas Dell, if it's an old server and they want $300, I guess I've been told, and I'm not recommending this, but I've been told that you can go to eBay and search for Dell Enterprise license, and somebody in a country that doesn't speak English as a first language will generate it somehow, and you'll magically get it for like $50 or whatever it is. So there's ways around it. It's not genuine, but then again, Dell's prices are extortion level prices, so you get what you deserve, especially if it's aftermarket. Like, that's crazy.
That's kind of ridiculous. But
okay, so I guess we both agree then essentially that we like Dell.
Again, I've had bad experiences with HPE too, so I'm kind of burnt on them support wise too.
Yeah.
Getting kicked from it's a storage issue to it's a networking issue to it's a compute issue. Playing phone queue when you're on a P2 or a P1 incident is just
that's not cool.
Fun, not worth my time. Maybe things have gotten better. It's been a year or two since I've had to deal with them, but I didn't get the feeling that they were that much better.
Right. And there's a lot of them. Like if you go to eBay and you look for aftermarket servers for Homelab or whatever, there's tons of HPE stuff, and I feel like it's just like next. I'm not even gonna try.
Yeah.
So, and I don't honestly. I think that there was a time, and people in the audience can correct me if there's some old timers out there, that HPE didn't used to be that way. I'm talking about during the ProLiant era when you had Compaq and HP merge. Because I remember a job I had, we had these big old ProLiant servers, and they were HPE ProLiants.
Yeah.
But they were no frills, no BS. They just worked great.
Yeah.
And they were bulletproof. But times have changed, obviously, and things are not that way anymore. So, but okay.
And I think the data centers are the way, because when I walk around our colo, it's all Dell or Supermicro.
Yeah.
I'm just seeing it that way.
Yeah.
And I mean, honestly, from like a viewpoint, the Cisco stuff isn't too bad, like in terms of hardware, but it does come with its quirks and
personality.
It's hard to justify buying Cisco when it comes with its own quirks to it, whereas the Dell stuff, majority of the time, just works.
Mm-hmm. I will say, but for a home lab, I wouldn't personally recommend using Dell, because I think that you run into some issues with Dell gear that make it more prohibitive. Like, whereas I would never get HPE stuff for home because of, like you said, locking of firmwares and things like that. Dell typically makes that stuff available. So that's not like an issue of like, oh, I can't get a firmware for this. As long as it's a supported chassis, you typically are able to download it. But I have had issues with Dell has done a lot to make these more, like, especially when you get into later generations of iDRAC, more integrated, more connected. And when those things start to have issues, it like I had an R410. That's older box. Don't get me wrong. Old box, and it had a DRAC issue.
Yeah.
And when that happened, the DRAC issue would not let the server boot anymore because it wouldn't initialize the BMC. And so then I had this 1U server that was essentially useless, and I could do nothing with it.
Well, yeah, and I feel that. I feel you have to also like check your listings, make sure you're getting, iDRAC Enterprise. That'll give you the KVM because the KVM's not always included with the standard license. I couldn't even get the iDRAC online on that.
Yeah, it would throw up an orange light on the little LCD display and be like, iDRAC initialization failed, and it would never go anywhere.
Yeah.
And you're like, what do? You can't go buy an iDRAC and push it.
Well, and I think that's why things like ASRock and Gigabyte have spun up server divisions because they can just build you, like Supermicro does, a box, install open source. I think it's called OpenBMC. You have to let me know if I'm wrong on that. Instead of Redfish? Redfish is like the orchestrator for all the BMCs, but there's kind of just ways to talk. You have agreed upon standards for what a BMC does, but everyone kind of does their own thing.
Sure.
But that's why these things came up, because when the hyperscalers started doing, hyperscalers don't really want to pay for Dell OME. Right. Hyperscalers don't care about that. They hired a bunch of engineers to do that. And so when a Gigabyte server fails, rip and replace, and then we're done, and we're back on to what we're doing. Right. Cranking out more Azure VMs to be part of a bot network or whatever you're doing, right? But that's why those things came around. And like, there's even stuff with like the Open Compute project, which is entirely different, which is using 48 volt DC volt rails, and I mean that's fully integrated things where everything is swap out, everything is its own node, and that's getting way out of scope for this context. But kind of just like, people got tired of being tied in to these vendors and all this stuff, things, and how it's going.
Yeah, I agree. And why can't I get rid of this?
You can only join.
I can only join. What the heck? Hold on.
There you go. Oh, but it's coming out of there.
Great.
That's
cool.
fair.
Pretend that didn't happen.
That's okay.
All right.
So what would you use in your Homelab?
If I was to rank them in order, I would start with Supermicro, because the fundamental reason is that because you're going to get a server that looks like a standard server without anything that might be feature add to an enterprise but is costly or problematic for you as a home labber or a self-hoster, whatever your intentions are with your stuff. It is closer to what a regular regular computer or workstation experience is like than it is to like a server enterprise thing where you've got all these different plugins and these things that cost money and they're licensed and they cost all this effort. Like it's just a much better aftermarket, like end of life, end user experience, right?
Yeah.
Secondly, I would go with Dell after that, because Dell makes some. The downside of Supermicro is that I don't think that their gear is very pretty.
Well, yeah,
and this is completely cosmetic,
aesthetics,
but
especially the R40, like Dell's the R40 series,
right,
looks so much nicer than any of them. They got the honeycomb
They're
grills.
so
They've got,
sexy. I'm sorry, like we shouldn't be like swayed by the look of it. Like, oh, this shiny bauble that's just average. No, I mean it's I love that. Like. My VX Rails, they're all that. I've got a bunch of precision workstation, rack-mounted workstations. They've all got that, and they just look, when they're in a rack, you're proud of them. Like, I want to take people in here and show you this stuff because I think it looks sexy. It's like, it's the data center nerd equivalent of like owning a Ferrari or something expensive. Where you're like, just look at this. It's art. But Supermicro's like, our bezels are just plastic, and there's just some slats in it to cut down on the dust. And if you don't like it, just take the bezel off. We don't care. Don't even buy a bezel. $15, whatever. But realistically speaking, from a data center from a home lab perspective, like Supermicro is where it's at.
Yeah.
I mean, I think all of my stuff downstairs. You actually have gone the build your own route, which I totally respect. With the caveat that your main boards are made by Supermicro. Right?
Yeah, I mean, I have two Epic 70 551s or something along those lines. But they're Supermicro boards. Supermicro's got their IPMI on it.
Yeah.
They're really great, and you just drop them into any ATX case and it works.
Yeah, that's great.
That's the other nice thing about Supermicro is their cases, even though they're a little bit expensive because you're getting a black paint and PSUs and all that, but they are standard ATX.
They're not proprietary.
There are some that are proprietary, but you can buy standard ones. Whereas I can't buy a Dell chassis without it requiring their specific T-shaped motherboard in there.
The main board that's in all those is specially designed to fit into this case because they've engineered a singular product, which is why on eBay, when I see people CTOing Dell stuff and they're like, you have to buy the motherboard, I'm like, what are you doing? Like, that's the one thing you can't take out of that because you can't just go and buy something.
There's no other one for it.
Right.
Like, but what was it with with that approach though of being a standard ATX, you do lose cool things like OCP3 NICs and kind of the stuff you can kind of slide in for, to go to that 100, 40, 100 gig. I mean, you had some stuff that we were trying to test with it and we had to go find specific NICs for.
You're back to just PCI Express interfaces, right? And so then you end up having to get a motherboard that has enough of those presented on the board and electrically active so you can use them.
But I mean, I would recommend Dell stuff only for the fact that I feel like it's more prevalent. Just a little more, like not a lot, but just a little bit more prevalent. And I have an R730 XD right now, but knock on wood, that thing's been rock solid ever since it's been running, and it sits in my garage. And I'm sure I'm going to get some flack for putting my Homelab in a garage, but that's how it works.
Mine's downstairs in the garage. That's the other thing about the Supermicro stuff is I feel like it is more tolerant of intolerant environments. Whereas the Dell stuff, Dell's like, it's slightly too warm in here. We're going to run these fans at 100%.
Yeah, I found that there's a command you have to run. There's an IPMI command you can run that will turn down the fans, because mine did the same thing where it caught, like, it was too warm and it just sent those, 11,000 RPM fans off. Yeah. And I was like, no, turn it down. It's going to be, 50s, 60s in here. Chill out.
Yeah. And it's weird because I don't know if you knew this, but general recommendations for a server room / data center have been changing as far as like temperature levels.
Yeah.
Like when I first started, the whole idea was get it as cold as you can. Get it down to 60 degrees, 55, 60 degrees. I know it seems extreme, but 60 degrees, you need to be pumping in that cold air because those servers are going to pull that in and they're going to squirt out super hot air. You need to deal with that. Nowadays, they're recommending 70.
Yeah.
Which is 10. So if your ambient 70 going in the box, that means that your output is going to be at least 10 degrees warmer. Mm-hmm. We're talking Fahrenheit, guys. Sorry,
we're Celsius.
So that alone means that they've had to, and I know that Dell's actually adjusted those parameters for newer servers because the expectation is that these servers are more tolerant of heat than we thought, and this whole like idea that making it, you want a controlled environment. That's important for whatever you're building, whether you're trying to build a home lab or you're building a server room or whatever. You want to be able to control the temperature or the humidity, all those things, but not running it at such a low level that you're just wasting energy because you're afraid that your stuff's going to die.
Yeah, and I think on the other side, the ops side has kind of dictated that too, where like your operations or your facilities manager may, if you run your own data center, may want you to crank it up a couple of degrees to save on that power bill.
I don't know what that actually saves you, but I bet it's a ton of money.
Yeah, and I know like at data centers, they take all that hot air and they exfil it into other systems, other systems like that. They had one design that it was reheating the water at a low level, doing other things like that. So there's a lot of massive hot air moving. And so cranking it up just a couple more degrees may, save you the money you need, especially when you're in a giant data center environment.
Yeah, I wonder if a lot of those recommendations also have to do with trying to hit green targets.
I'm sure.
EPA green targets and cut down on the amount of carbon dioxide you're dumping into the air by having to run things at such high levels. But that's a side note. So, I mean, I think that do you have anything you want to add thought-wise on the server side of things? Like what's your TLDR thoughts?
My TLDR thoughts is get yourself a good rack server. Find a 2U. Don't mess around with 1Us.
No.
There are some nice, the R440s are not too loud, actually. Surprisingly, I have one. But I'd recommend 2U. Get you a couple 2Us. Be good to go.
Yeah.
Supermicro, I think, is probably the way to go, just to keep it cheap. Not that there's any less in quality, and if you get a good deal on a Dell, enjoy. Like, make sure you get that iDRAC Enterprise though, because
exactly.
it saves your butt.
Yeah.
I don't think I have too much else. You?
No, I think that's a fair statement. I don't want to scare people away from Dell because, I mean, in production they are really great. Like I would never recommend anything but, I mean, again, because I came from a Dell world, and when I started my Homelab, it was all Dell. And when I looked at Supermicro, this is.
I remember you like being
I was like
Supermicro,
no
one uses these ugly boxes.
That's trash. Look at that. I mean, that's you don't need that stuff. It's garbage. And then I don't know where I came across one, but I eventually got one, and I was like, oh my gosh, I was wrong. I was so wrong because there's no BS with it. And when you're doing things in life, and whether it's professionally in some sort of like you're an engineer, you're an infrastructure engineer, you're a server engineer, whatever you are. Or you're just a Homelab or self-hoster, always try to build the solutions or use the solutions that are the simplest to maintain.
Yeah.
Because the last thing you want to do is deal with something that is complicated and is easy for you to set up, but then you walk away from it. So that's why I like the Supermicro stuff. But I wouldn't turn down someone if you said to me, "Hey, I'm going to get rid of this Dell server," I'd be like, "Well." So I agree. I don't want to crap all over Dell, but I will crap all over HP all day long, every day of the week. You just send me a message. I'll be like, HP is crap. I'm sorry, guys. I'm sorry. Anyway, but I do want to talk about networking.
Okay. We're going to start at the router, or you want to start? No,
we're gonna start at the switch.
Okay.
Because I've got some bones to pick about certain stuff here, and I know that no one cares about this much stuff as much as you and I do. So, okay. So, I guess networking gear. So you put it in the wrong spot. That's cool. Let's talk about networking gear, and specifically manufacturers first. Is there any manufacturers that you love and that you would stay away from? Let's focus that on the enterprise business. Like this is for work. The
for
thing
like
that you have to
stuff?
you have to answer for a paycheck.
So I have an issue now. Okay. The team I work on doesn't do any networking anymore.
But you've had a lot of experience with
that. I've done some stuff.
So I posit to you a question that you're at a job, you are the sole dude, and you get to make all decisions and maintain this. What network gear would you buy versus what network gear would you stay away from?
It would depend. So if I'm doing a small business, like,
let's say the money was
small, medium enterprise, sure. I think I'd put them on Ubiquity.
Wow. I did not expect that answer.
But, maybe do some stuff with a cloud controller. Don't have to have them, completely locally host everything, run some stuff like that. Because for the small, medium enterprise, it's pretty good from what I can tell. Okay, it has its quirks like anything else.
Sure.
If you're going large as a non-network expert, no one's ever been fired for buying Cisco.
Say it. Oh my gosh.
But I don't know. Arista's really good. I've had very limited experience. I've been introduced to them and played with them a little bit, but nothing real. MikroTik's got a solid setup, and then you've got your Meraki's and your Junipers, which are all solid things, but I've just not been introduced to them. So I don't feel I can give a comfortable recommendation at that high level of we need 100 gig. We need, we need to go faster. Gigs. I don't know enough about that. You've done more networking than I have. So what do you think?
Okay. So, I would rather die 1,000. Let me just start at the top here. I'd rather die 1,000 deaths than to ever implement Meraki switching into a company unless they are a small franchise making hamburgers where you didn't have VLANs and you didn't have complexity. I will fight anybody who comes at me and says that Meraki switching is great because I have a huge pile of personal experience that happens on a monthly basis. In fact, if I may, where I work, I've coined the term TMBS, which stands for typical Meraki bullshit.
Okay.
Because the things that happen on there are so bad and typical that you're like, of course, it's the Meraki. What's happening? I can't send packets to this host. What's wrong? It's the Meraki.
It could have talked to the cloud controller, so now it doesn't work.
It's not even that. Okay, so let's talk about the top line first. So who would I recommend? You're right. I love that you said nobody gets fired for buying Cisco.
No one. That's a tagline, right?
It is. It wasn't until I think that because you and I work at companies that have a lot in common. Yeah. I'd never heard that statement until I had come to the place I work now. We don't work at the same place, keep in mind, but this is like a common thing I heard say. Cisco is great when it comes to just their standard.
It's pricey though. It is expensive. They make you what was it when Cisco decided to leave Russia? The running joke, they apparently had to send in people to destroy something like about $24 million worth of gear. And the running joke was, oh, that must have been like, what, a router and 2 switches? Like
it was one of those big frames, a big catalyst frame that it burned it up. No, the reason why I think the Cisco's great is not because of all or any of their like modern technologies. I think that from a reliability and corporate standpoint, or production standpoint, to be clear, their gear is rock solid.
Yeah.
You don't have to worry about goofy layer 3 routing issues on your core switches. You don't have to worry about VLANs and LACP trunks and lags that are just all of a sudden they're just going to stop talking to each other, and you're going to break that lag even though it says it's fine. I'm looking at you, Meraki, but
which is funny because Cisco owns Meraki, and like
that
none of
obvious.
that got shared. You know?
No, well, and there's things that they've done to share like physical parts, like the new Meraki switches share a lot in common with the Cisco chassis designs, but the differentiator is that software, and I think the probably the internals and the amount of horsepower and stuff.
Yeah.
Do you want to know why I really like the reliability issues I've had with Meraki? Because I will go off.
Yeah.
I don't want. Okay, here.
I'm not sure we have time for just rant on Meraki.
Okay. So, and when I'm speaking about Meraki, I do want to like differentiate some things. I think that their Wi-Fi offerings and that their entire Wi-Fi portfolio is rock solid. And I would recommend for anybody who's got anything from a small business all the way up to an enterprise to use it, because I think that they provide not just adequate, but like very good stuff.
Yeah.
I think that their firewalls, which we'll talk about firewalls in a bit, are fine.
Yeah, and like comparing cloud controllers, it's hard. Like they have some things that even Ubiquiti or like TP-Link Omada just doesn't have. Right. And they can do like some things that I'm just like, why? This is such a great feature. I can like see the clients and I can turn all them off or do things on like a site level instead of having to do things on like individually and stuff like that.
Their whole core business was Wi-Fi in the beginning, right? And I feel like their entry into all network products has been where kind of that inexperience shows. But there's just things that I've experienced with Meraki as a company that when it comes to their data center level switching or their enterprise level or their higher end MS switches, things that bother me. Like I will say that, and I'll move on. But the one thing I'm going to say, fundamentally, the problem that I have with Meraki is this, and I'll compare it to a standard Cisco switch. If I have a Cisco switch and it's exhibiting the same problems as a Meraki switch, I can connect to that Cisco switch directly, and I can get on a console, and I can see what is going on, and I can pull tech logs. I can pull that's tech, show tech, and you're going to get everything that's going on. You're going to get all this debug dump stuff, right? If you've got a Meraki switch and you are having a problem with it and the switch is alive but acting weird, you cannot get that information. You cannot. There's not like
a USB console too or something like that?
There's a management port on the back, and that management port only allows you to set basically very basic functions on it, but it has nothing to do with the problems of the switch. On top of that, logs are ephemeral on Meraki switches. On a Cisco switch, if you have, and again, comparing these two, even the same company, but on a Cisco switch, if you have problems and you reboot the switch and things recover, you have history on the Cisco switch because there is permanent storage.
Yeah. On
Meraki, if you power it down, the logs are gone, and nobody at Meraki support will be able to help you, and that's just unacceptable. Unacceptable. Anyway, okay. Steps off soapbox.
Yeah, it's not a sensitive topic for you.
No, I mean, this is because I've had some things where I just had some problems where the default answer is like, my company is using it for production. Yeah. These Meraki switches. And so when one of them malfunctions, it is typically depending on what part of the business, and it's a production down thing. It's a big deal, right? And Meraki won't help you if you reboot. Like if rebooting the switch is going to fix it, and then you call them up afterwards, they're like, "I'm sorry, you needed to have called us when it was failing." I'm like, I'm losing thousands of dollars a minute because of this. That's one of those generic things you hear, like, business type saying, like, I'm losing thousands of dollars. Like when you can't make parts in a factory, you're losing money because those parts need to be turned into something else, right? And so if your only action is to get it up as fast as possible, because that's all the business cares about. Yeah. And you're like, they can't help you. Well, that's unacceptable. But okay, so I will not recommend Meraki ever. Sorry. And if you guys feel differently, or if there's a Meraki engineer You can tell me all day. We can have a conversation out of bound.
You've been burnt.
I'm sorry. We can add it and we can talk. I have a lot of older history with like the Extreme Network stuff as well.
Yeah, I was wondering that. I haven't heard of Extreme, and I've heard of Ruckus, but I like outside of Linus Tech Tips, I don't know a person who uses Ruckus.
And I like. Or Brocade, which doesn't exist as a network switch maker anymore.
Rest in peace, by Brocade.
Broadcom bought them and kept the data center fiber channel stuff, and then they sold off the switching. Their switching was fantastic too, but whatever. But for home labs and that kind of stuff, I think that we're both kind of in line. Like you and I both pretty much have Ubiquiti networks at home. Right?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I use Ubiquiti for my wireless, and I use it for like my access switching. Mm-hmm. My core switching is still done by a Dell.
It's like a Force 10, something like that.
It's an 8132F, which is a 10 gigabit switch. It's a loud 1U switch. It's fun.
It's like a stand behind the 747 taking off.
Yeah, and Dell's switching is interesting. Mm-hmm. It's on levels with MikroTik in terms of users interfaces and stuff like that. I never ran into any issues. I was able to upgrade to the latest firmware that it was supported before the switch went EOL. Mm-hmm. And it's fine. I don't need to reboot it regularly or anything weird like that. It just kind of sits there, and I'm only using it for layer 2 stuff. It can do layer 3. I've not had to worry about that just because of how I run my network as a router on a stick. Yeah. So I don't need to, try to work with layer 3 routing on my switch. That just doesn't benefit my use case.
Right. It'd benefit you if you were worried about speed. Like that's the benefit of having a layer 3 routing. So you can use those ASICs to actually handle doing fast, routing of traffic. But you and I are using layer 3 routing on the stick with our routers because we want to be able to control access.
Yeah, I want to dictating what goes where, but they're fine. I appreciate Unify's dashboard, and I appreciate the stuff I can get from it. I'm a little disheartened by their pivot to seemingly wanting an on-site controller for everything. So like
that bothers you?
Yeah, like the UDM. Like I want to be able to run it in a VM and stuff like that. I don't want.
Oh, so you're talking about specifically about their what seems to be a not so direct but kind of more indirect, like passive aggressive move to try to not have people run their own personal controllers, but to buy another piece of gear that has the controller
a piece of gear with a controller on there.
Right.
And I'm gonna come out and say it. Ubiquiti's layer 3 sucks. It's bad firewalls. They're not they're not gonna put you in danger. There's just when you look at things like pfSense, OpenSense, even ViOS, it feels better than Ubiquiti with all their stuff to it. And so I don't know. I would rather spend my time, at least as from an engineer standpoint, setting up a pfSense, putting PF blocker on it, stuff along those lines, than trying to deal with Ubiquiti stuff, even if I miss out on the single pane of glass full router experience with Ubiquiti.
Yeah, from a gear perspective, I know a lot of people also are big fans of MikroTik. I believe personally that MikroTik's hardware is good. Mm-hmm. I have a personal bone to pick about the fact that they seem to give 0 Fs about the user experience of trying to manage those.
That's fair. I mean, clearly not enough people complain about it. So,
oh my gosh, I think that I feel like at a certain point, it's become like they have just drawn a line in the sand. They're like, look, this is who we are. You don't like it, you don't buy it. By the way, here's a 100 gig switch that's like $30.
Yeah, it's like it's $800, which for 100 gig right now is wild.
It is
low. So
that's the nice thing about makers like specifically MikroTik, because they are pushing the boundaries of cost and value for high speed. You just have to live with the abysmal user experience, but you get great performance, right?
And I don't find any problem with SwitchOS. RouterOS, I feel, is a trip to walk through.
Have you launched the software? And it looks like
I think you're stuck in RouterOS. So
it's the same. It's the same management software, right?
You switch it over, it simplifies things with SwitchOS.
And I'm not talking about like the website you log into. There's actually a standalone piece of software for them.
Yeah, that's usually what ends up that shows you the router board side of it. You can switch it over to be just a switch.
It looks
It's
just like
better.
Windows
It's
95.
not as good as Ubiquiti. It's not as good as Meraki. It's
Right.
not, it doesn't have all that the fluff behind it, but it also is a 100 gig switch for
Yeah.
$700.
How
So
can you turn down 100 gig? Well, I mean, start buying adapters and
oh, yeah,
all of a sudden you're like, oh wait,
no one
this
said
is
it was
not-
cheap. They said it was cheaper.
Yeah, it's not. Okay, so what are your thoughts then, opinions on like say TP-Link or Netgear or more the bargain?
Great layer 2 switches. You want a layer 2 switch? You want to just push packets to things that are connected? Fantastic.
It's like that Oprah Winfrey, like you get a car and you get a car. It's
Yeah.
like, you get a layer 2 and
Like,
you get a layer 2 and you get a layer 2. Everybody gets layer 2s.
And I haven't played with TP-Link Omada.
Yeah.
I've heard it's basically Ubiquiti clone. It even comes with the same layer 3 problems, which I think is really funny.
Oof, that sounds like somebody should file a lawsuit. But...
Yeah, but the worst thing I've had to do with a Netgear or like TP-Link, unplug and replug, and ta-da, you're done. Like it's up in seconds. I don't have to think about it. They are what they are.
Yeah.
But in a Homelab, if you're crazy like Rich and I, you like to watch metrics about all your clients talking to things, and you want to see pretty numbers go up. I want trends and I want histograms. Yeah.
I want evidence of what's going on because that stuff helps me understand the actual landscape of my environment.
And especially now when you have Internet of Things, everything.
Right.
One of the funny things I like to do is when I set up a new Internet of Things, I have PF blocker on it, but I like to watch all the IPs that it tries to talk out to and just gets stuffed by my firewall. But yeah, I for me, Ubiquiti if you can swing it, Microtech if you can't.
Sure.
Kind of thought.
Yeah. On the TP-Link stuff, I have been outspoken on the channel about TP-Link hardware, but mostly on the wireless stuff. I have a few TP-Link like 5-port switches. And they even have layer 3 in them. I don't use it, but it's there. It'll do tagging, VLAN
they
tagging.
Have 2.5s out now, which is like something that a lot of like Cisco's multi-gig stuff is so expensive.
Well, you're not gonna put that in your home.
You aren't. But I'm just putting it out there. Like they're one of the few ones that have 2 and 5G devices that are like reachable.
They have 5 gig. Multi-gig ports now?
I think so. I know they have 2.5 for sure.
Yeah.
But like they're way closer to doing that multimedia. Cat 6 can do 10, 5, 2, and 1, right? Why can't we use it? Well, multi-switching costs a lot apparently.
Yeah. Those PHYs in there, those ASICs, they're more expensive. So, running higher frequencies is more expensive.
Yeah. But
so, okay. I mean, and I think we're pretty much on the same side. I don't know if I would necessarily, when it comes to like business, if I can afford Cisco and I can put it in and it's a set it and forget it sort of thing.
Yeah.
The downside of Cisco gear in that is that honestly, if you don't have someone who's familiar with the CLI and Cisco stuff, it becomes more of a problem. So you need to find a happy balance between the two.
Yeah, like Cisco's all really good on their uptime, but they, like every other computer, needs a yearly reboot to make sure things are just, plus they have firmware updates. Like there was a bug that came out a couple of years ago that you could hook into a Cisco phone and layer 2 all the way into the core switch and you'd have full admin access. And so things like that happen. You need to patch those things. You need someone there to take care of these things so that you aren't part of the problem.
Right. Don't be part of the problem. Take care of your stuff. But that transcends everything. Even if you're running a Homelab, assuming that you have access to those things, whether it's software or hardware firmwares, you should be keeping track of it. That's the cost of having gear that has those features and functionalities that you have to keep it up to date because you're potentially just as vulnerable as a big company. Yep. You might feel like you're less of a target, but you're still a target. Everybody's a target.
My firewall says different. My PFM blocker says that I am just equally as a target with my one IP.
Right, we're all targets. But I think people's natural assumptions with their vulnerabilities are that I'm just an individual at home. There's no advanced threat actor out there who's trying to get into my network.
Well, and you don't even need an advanced one. If you get your public IP online, they'll DDoS you for kicks.
For the lulz.
Yeah, right.
All right, so here's the deal. This tech chat ran way too long for just a singular podcast. Branden and I talked for over an hour and a half on a whole bunch of different mixed bag data center topics. So what I'm going to do is split this into 2 halves. You guys just watched or listened to the first half. Next podcast release, which will be next month, we'll go ahead and put the other half of it, which had firewalls and data center infrastructure stuff like cabinets and UPSs and stuff like that. So keep an ear out and an eye out for that one. And thanks again for watching. We hope you guys enjoy these. Let us know in the comments if you agree or disagree, or you think we said something wrong. We would love to interact with you. Get into our Discord if you're not already. Buy some merch if you're into that sort of stuff. And for our members, thank you guys so much for being members. We appreciate it. It really helps us keep going. And we hope to see you and hear from you soon.